Welcome to All Souls and a Happy New Year to everybody. Can you believe it's 2023?
It's amazing. It's amazing. It's great to see you. It's great to be together on this first Sunday to start the year off right. And being together with you makes it feel right. We've got Rick Fortner and me. It's the two of us this morning with you. So we're going to make this, we're going to make this a special service together. We have Reverend Barbara Prose is our online minister. I know there are a bunch of people. There's probably hordes of people who are just home in your pajamas watching with us. And I know some of our kids are in their pajamas as well today because you were told it's pajama day in the Sunday school. So we're glad to see you. There's going to be a story with Shannon Boston here in just a minute. But I want to welcome everyone. And I invite you to get up and give somebody a fist bump, a hello, a smile, and just let's greet each other to start this new year. All right. Well, as we say in our 10 o'clock service every Sunday, this is indeed a day which God has made. Let us rejoice in it and be glad, and let us count our many blessings. Let us be grateful for the capacity to see, to feel, to hear, and to understand. Let us be grateful for the incredible gift of life, and let us be especially grateful for the ties of love which bind us together, giving dignity, meaning, worth, and joy to all of our days. Please join me in our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Church in Portland, Oregon, Reverend Allison Miller. Allison, would you come forward and light our chalice for you? I know I didn't ask you to do this, but it's really easy. You know how to do it. It's right here. You can light the chalice if this is where. There we go. All right. Thank you. Allison Miller, everybody. Isn't it great to see Allison? We light our chalice this morning, the first of the new year, bringing light and warmth and brightness and renewed connections, old friends, new friends. May this be a light that represents a year that is bright, that is shining, that is new, and that brings into this world a light of peace and hope and justice for all people. Thank you, Allison.
I know what it says in your order of service, but I completely rewrote this fable, and now it's the squirrel and the blue jay. Learn to let go. A fable adapted by Shannon Boston. There was once a very hungry jaybird searching the woods for the perfect morsel, and with her keen eye, she spotted a large, tasty-looking acorn at the end of an oak branch. And seeing the makings of a fine supper, that jay swooped down and plucked the dangling acorn and held it triumphantly in her beak. She flapped her wings proudly and began to think about how best to break open the shell. Meanwhile, on the ground below, an equally hungry squirrel who believed he had spotted the acorn first and had been in the process of plotting to get it for his own dinner, saw the jay swoop in and steal it. So with a plan that was clever, though not particularly nice, the squirrel called up to the jay high in the tree and said, "Hey there, friend Jay, what's that you have in your beak?" And the jay, who was hungry enough by now that she was not thinking through her decisions very well, called back and said, "I found a very nice acorn that I'm going to eat." But when the jay opened her mouth, the very nice acorn fell out and dropped to the ground just as the squirrel had hoped it would, but the squirrel did not count on where the acorn would land. It hit the ground and rolled into a shallow hole. And the squirrel ran to the hole and reached in to pull out the acorn with both his hands, but the hole was just small enough that when he wrapped his paws around the acorn, it was too wide to get back up out of the hole. And the jay, meanwhile, was very unhappy at having been tricked out of her supper and began to shout at the squirrel down below, who couldn't leave because he was holding on to the acorn, trying and failing to pull it out of the hole. Now that could be the end of our story. The squirrel and the jay could be stuck there right now, still arguing with each other and both getting hungrier and hungrier. And the squirrel who couldn't let go of his greed, and the jay who couldn't let go of her anger. But what if the two of them had worked together? If the jay had let go of her anger at being tricked, she could have stopped yelling at the squirrel and used her sharp beak to peck down into that hole to break up the acorn into smaller pieces. And if the squirrel could have let go of his greed of wanting the whole acorn and his fear of losing it, then he could have reached in and picked each piece out one at a time and shared it with the jay. If they'd worked together, they both might have gotten to enjoy some of that acorn. As we enter this new year, let's think about the things we need to let go of that may no longer be serving us. Old habits, old routines, old reactions. Come on, kids. Let's go talk about letting go of the old so that we can create new things.
And even as we let go of the old and welcome in the new, we also hold on to the old, some of those who've died, who've gone before us, and we have some candles to light for members of our church. And you might have some names that you want to lift up in just a moment, but I want to light a candle, our first candle for Francia Allen, one of our pastoral care team members. Her niece, Valerie, lost her father, John McConnell, and we light a candle for their family. We also light a candle for our member, Tony Viles, and her family on the loss of her grandmother, Evelyn Zink, last week, and also to our member, the family of our member, Jean Hillman, who just passed away this week, and also a candle for another member who died, Dan Jocelyn, who passed away this past week as well, and Steve Freeman, our online member from Lake Forest, Illinois, asked us to light a candle for his mother, who is in a nursing home, and a final candle from me before I ask you for names to light candles, and this is for our dear Rick Fortner and his family on the loss of Rick's younger brother, Stephen, who passed away a few days ago. Please name names and we'll light candles for those you want to bring into our service today.
Well, I'd like to remember the homeless lost at the shelters.
The loss of homeless folks here in Tulsa, those in the shelters. We're lighting a candle for them for warmth. Please. Jim Butler, thank you. Doug McCartney. Mary LeClure.
Harold Thomason, he is paralyzed, my brother-in-law is paralyzed with the chest down after a really bad bout of flu and pneumonia.
Wow.
And it's 3 weeks now, so please keep him in my.
We are lighting a candle. We'll keep them in your prayers. And Daryl, may the light of this candle and all of our love help you to make it through. Anyone else? Dee Spencer. Carl Jensen. Mike Newman. Hope he's watching. Say one more time. Grace Limmerbean. Charlie Cox. And I light one last candle for all those names that we haven't lifted up in words, but who remain very dear and near in our hearts this morning. Let us pray. Beloved, we enter a new year, a new season, a new time in our lives. It may feel arbitrary in some ways, but indeed we will circle the sun one more time. And as we make this turn, may those places in our own hearts that need turning and redirection find the strength and the will and the good fortune. We lift up the names of those who have been named in our candle lighting, those who are sick, those who have passed, their families, a special lifting up of Rick Fortner as he plays music for us today, even as he's grieving the loss of his dear brother. May we find in this year something we have never found before, something we have hoped for, something we have dreamed of. May this be the beginning of a new story. May this be the opportunity for new possibilities. These and the many prayers of our hearts we lift up now in the silence, and we invite those who are honoring the anniversary of the death or in the first year of the loss of a loved one to rise in the silence until the music begins.
Ring out the old, ring in the new, ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let it go. Ring out the false, ring in and the true. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. And we invite you to look in your hymnal to number 112, number 112. Do you hear? And then I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we sing together this classic hymn, Do You Hear, number 112. Please join me. Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, in the sky, through the land? Do you hear, in the heights and the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain? Do you hear, Through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush, do you hear in the hush of your soul, hear the cry, fear won't still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh, startling trill, in your soul, from the place where you stand to the outermost strand. Do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear?
Beautiful, you sound great. We are not many, but we are mighty here this morning. It's great to see everybody who's here. Speaking of hearing, I heard a prayer recently that caught my attention. What do you think of this? Dear God, so far today I've done all right. I haven't gossiped or been greedy, grumpy, nasty, selfish, or self-indulgent. I'm very thankful for that. But in a few minutes, God, I'm going to get out of bed. And from then, I'm going to need a lot of help. Now, as the new year began just at midnight, maybe all you've done so far in 2023 is get out of bed and come to church, either in person or online. So you might still be on a great track, living into all your goals and resolutions and your best self. But what about the rest of the year? What's it going to take? Gossip, greed, grumpiness, selfishness, and self-indulgence will probably keep showing up now and then. Maybe not in you, maybe it's just me. But hang in there with me. For some of us, shame, self-loathing, judgment are usually mixed in as well. The question is not really if they will show up, at least not for me, but maybe for you. I just want to say, if this doesn't apply to you, thanks for listening. I'm just talking about those of us who do wrestle with selfishness, self-doubt, occasional judgment and other internal struggles. For those of you who don't, you can just listen in and think how lucky you are. But for the rest of us mortals, the question is not if these things will show up this year, but how will we meet these things this year when they show up? How will we relate to these emotions and these states of mind, these thoughts? Will we get hooked by them, be reactive, and stay small? Or could this year be the opportunity to be mindful and curious about these states of mind that come and go? And maybe this is the year that we can begin to change the story, especially those stories that we tell ourselves, that we've been telling ourselves over and over. Could this be the year to experience these stories and these states of mind coming and going without defining you, without defining your day? Insight meditation teacher Tara Brach says it begins by being a compassionate witness. Now, since August, you may have heard I've been talking a lot about this idea of split attention. It's when we're able to pay attention to what we're feeling and what we're thinking as it's happening. Now, when we don't split our attention, we're just all in on our feelings. We're just in it. We don't have a lot of thought and awareness of what's going on. When we don't split our attention and we're not a witness to our own thoughts and our own feelings, then when someone cuts us off in traffic, you might become mad, start yelling at the person and saying all kinds of things that you probably would never say if they could actually hear you. With split attention, you witness the reaction as it's happening. Look at this. You feel your blood start boiling. Your heart start racing. You might notice a string of four-letter words forming on the back of your tongue. And even perhaps feel your proud middle finger beginning to unfurl itself uncontrollably. Now, as a witness, you allow yourself to see your reaction and perhaps choose a different direction. As a compassionate witness, you don't judge yourself for having the feeling or having the thought. You become curious. And you love yourself, knowing that emotions come, thoughts come. Many things will come and they will go. For me, a daily meditation practice is the best way I know to sort of cultivate this ability to split our attention between what we're feeling and thinking in the moment and sort of an awareness about it. You may be able to do it right now as I'm talking. You're hearing me talking, but you're also sort of checking in. Oh yeah, well, what am I feeling? Am I feeling tired? I want to fall asleep. He's preaching. We don't like hearing people go on and on. I don't know what you're feeling, but you can be aware of two things at the same time. That's the split attention that I'm talking about. And what's beyond our reactions, and what's beyond our emotions about our reactions are our stories. Stories that either happened to us in our life or were handed down to us by someone else, like parents or grandparents or teachers, or these are stories that we just made up out of our own experience. Things like, well, people have thoughts about themselves, maybe like, I'm not such a kind person. Or, I'm not a very creative or artistic person. Or, I'm not good at relationships. Or, I have bad luck with money. You know, we each have stories that we tell ourselves on repeat, and they're not always serving us. The thing is that these stories, they don't need to end with a period. You may be in the middle of the story. We all have stories about money, for example. I mean, money itself is a story. It's a piece of paper. It's worth nothing except if we all believe that it's something and we use it, right? It's a story. And we all have these stories. People have stories like, I'll never have enough money. I'm destined to be in debt. People like me always owe other people money. That's a story. I always worry about money. I'll always worry about money. I just worry about money. These are stories that people talk about. We need to, here's what I'm trying to say today, is that we need to get rid of the period. You know, we got to get rid of the period and turn it into a comma somehow. So I'm just going to try to, all right, that's good, man. But we have work stories, right? Stories about our work. Stories like, I'll be stuck in this job that makes me miserable for the rest of my life. I just can't get out of it. I need to stay in it, even though it makes me so unhappy. Or I'll never be able to really do what I want to do. But the story doesn't have to end with a period, right? We can get rid of the period and turn it into a comma. But most of us have body image stories and stories about health that we tell ourselves. Like, I can never lose weight. Other people can lose weight. I can't lose weight. Or I just cannot stick to an exercise. I'm just not that kind of person. I can't stick to a routine. I can't quit smoking. Or I can't give up alcohol, even though it might be destroying my life. Or with my genes, I'll probably die young. These are stories that we tell ourselves. And what we need to do is get rid of the period and turn it into a comma, knowing that we may be in the middle of our story. All right. So the things I'll do to help you remember a message, So our tendency is to think that our stories are true. We're wired to think that once we have a story that it's finished. Like it has a beginning, a middle, and end, because we think we're at the end, but it's up to us to really think about the fact that, no, I may be in the middle of this story, or I could choose to be in the middle of this story. As long as I have breath, as long as I have life, I have a chance to change this story or put a different spin on this story. People have, their relationship stories about being unlucky in love, about not being good at intimacy, about, thinking I'm failing as a parent. I never forgive. I can't forgive. I always attract the wrong kind of people into my life. I'm not a very good friend. There's all kinds of stories that we tell, and we need to get rid of the period, and we need to begin to put some commas in place. When I was 19 years old, my mom put a bug in my ear by asking me, would you ever consider being a Unitarian minister? Now, at the time, there couldn't have been further from my reality. I was 19. I was living a little wild, doing things that I wouldn't think ministers would do. So the idea of being a minister, I thought, geez, my mom doesn't really know what I'm doing at night when she's asleep and, that kind of thing. But it put a little bug in my ear. She described qualities that she saw in me that she thought would make for a good minister, make this be a career or a vocation that would be satisfying for me and that I'd be good at. And a few years later, when someone important to me asked me what I thought I might do for a living, I mentioned what my mom had said. And this person saw it quite differently. They said, that's crazy. And this person went on with a list of qualities that a minister has that they thought I clearly did not have. And it was a crushing blow, really, for my spirit at the time. Like, wow, okay. Like everyone else, I have my self-doubts. Could I do this? And then someone else who knew me and someone else who knew a lot more about life than I know about was like, no, come on, that's ridiculous. Now, that could have been the end of the story that I told. I could have told myself that story over and over again for the rest of my life. But I was fortunate, and had I done that, I would have missed my calling in life, what brings my life alive. And yet, Fortunately for me, I put a comma in it. And instead of identifying with the qualities that the one person thought I did not have, somehow I emphasized those qualities that my mom saw in me, and I found that that was the story I told myself about who I was in the world. Now, I just finished a book at the end of the year called Choose Your Story, Change Your Life by Kendra Hall is her name. And in it, the author says, positive affirmations are not enough to change our stories. Looking in the mirror and repeating every morning, I've got this, I can do this. It's not enough to change deep-held stories. We're talking about regaining control of our subconscious, which requires coming up with counter stories. Generalizations are not stories. Goals are not stories. Dreams and affirmations are not stories. Stories have characters and contexts and details. They have a beginning and a middle and eventually an end. Here's a simple illustration based on Hall's, one that Hall gives in her book. Margaret had been gaining weight. She noticed that she did not have the energy she used to have to do what she had to do, and her doctor suggested that she should exercise regularly. Margaret's story was, I just don't have time to exercise. I've got children, I've got work, I've got so many things to do. I just don't, I've tried to exercise, and I've gotten started, but then I just don't have the time. And then Margaret remembered just a small story from her own life that wasn't that old, when she remembered a day when she dropped her daughter off at dance practice. And once her daughter was dropped off, she had like an hour to wait, and she was going to call her mom. She needed to call her mom. So she was talking to her mom on the phone in her car, and then she looked out the window and she noticed there was a running track right outside her door. So she thought, hey, you know what? I'm just going to get out, I'll talk to my mom, and I'll walk around the track, and I'll start getting exercise. And that's exactly what she did. And then Margaret took that story, and instead of repeating the old story that she doesn't have time, I just don't have time. I'm not like other people. I got too much going on. She began to tell herself every morning, you know, I'm good at finding time even when I have a lot to do. I'm good at it. And she'd remind herself of that story. You know, I had this and that, and then I just walked while I talked, and I can do that. I'm good at that. And she just kept reminding herself of that story every morning for a few months. And as she did, she started to have more experiences and more stories of her finding time in the midst of a busy schedule. And she started to say, you know, I'm a person who is good at finding time, even in the midst of a busy schedule. She changed her story to being a creative person who finds time. We all have stories that we tell ourselves on repeat, and some of them keep us stuck. So changing our stories is pretty simple. It's just not easy. It takes effort. It begins by identifying the stories that we tell ourselves over and over again. I've written down a nice little list yesterday. And then we need to explore that story. Where does this story come from? You know, why do I tell this story? What happened? Where did this begin? And just do some exploration about why do I always tell myself that that is who I am? Because we create these self-fulfilling prophecies of our own lives based on the stories that we tell ourselves over and over and over again. So then we need to find a counter story, some other story where we're like, well, you know, but then there's also this other time when I was really good at intimacy, or I was really good in a relationship, or I was a great friend, or I was, whatever it is that we're trying to counter, where I was a great parent to my child. Whatever that story is, then find that counter story and then begin to, every morning, wake up and tell that story, continue to remind yourself, see that story, and begin to create new stories. Our theme this month, the whole month of January, is creation. We are creative beings, and we create stories. And we create our life based on the stories that we tell ourselves. So one of the ways to gain control and become the authority in our own life, of our own life, is to become the author of our own stories. So as we begin this new trip around the sun in 2023, let's decide right now to root out stories that don't serve us, that aren't making our lives bigger, that aren't leading us towards the life that we want to live. And let's replace them with ones that do. This week, pay attention to the stories you notice you're telling yourself about yourself. Write them down. And if they're not leading you to the life you want, think of other stories that do. Begin to tell and retell yourself those positive stories about you and about who you are. See the scene. It's not, like I say, it's not just going to the mirror and saying, I'm great at this, I'm good at this, I'll do this. It's not just a vision board that puts a picture of, the car you hope to someday drive or whatever that, people do on the vision board, because those things are nice, but you need a story. There's something about narrative and storytelling that shifts our subconscious. So don't put a period where there could be a comma. You're in the middle of a lot of stories right now. And, the beginning of a new story could be the end of another story. The middle of a story could be the beginning of a different story. So the end can be the middle, and the middle can be the end, and we can choose where we are in the life of the story that we're living. As long as we have breath of life, our story is not over. And this is not about wishful thinking. It's not about denial of reality. This is about choosing what parts of you, what parts of your life you want to emphasize. Would a person want to tell their story as, I got bored and I daydreamed a lot in school, I'm really not a good student? Or, I have a very active imagination, which has led me to some of the greatest moments in my life and some of the greatest successes that I've ever had. It's the same person. It's the same circumstances, but it's a different way of telling the same story. One is life-giving and life-expanding, and one shrinks our lives down. Which story do we want to tell ourselves? There are 1,001 different ways to tell any story. And religion is the same way. Think about it. We can read the Bible and say that we are all sinners, and there's no way to redeem ourselves from this original sin. And so Jesus had to come and be tortured and die because it was the only way to redeem us of our inherent depravity. Or we can read the Bible and see a story of humanity that includes all kinds of people who sometimes do great and courageous and loving things, and those same people who sometimes do hurtful, cowardly, and foolish things. And Jesus was a teacher who taught us to love ourselves and to love one another and to care for the poor. Same Bible, same details, different emphasis. Completely changes the story and how we see ourselves. Choose the stories that serve and help you to love yourself, to love other people, and to care for those who need it the most. You can choose your stories, you can change your life, and there's no better time than now. Happy New Year. I love you. Amen.
"14 commas, 6 periods. 14 commas, 6 periods are in the next hymn we're going to sing. And the other thing I really like about this opportunity in this place is that we can change things. We're not stuck in any one way. And when Marlon said, not once, but twice, as long as we have breath, that's the first time. And I thought, wow, there's that hymn, just as long as I have breath, you know? You may not know it, but you're going to in a minute. And then he said it again, as long as we have breath. And I thought, okay, we have to change what I had originally made the plans to sing, which is a beautiful hymn. But can you look in your hymnal at number 6? It's just one number. Even if you're not going to sing, can you look at the hymnal? It's that gray book. And number 6 is, look at it with me. Just as long as I have breath, hymn number 6, I must, it doesn't say I may answer. It says I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. So I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join me as we sing hymn number 6. And I'll help you with it. Here we go. Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Verse 2. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
I want to just emphasize a few on the back of your program. There's a number of announcements about things coming up next Sunday. I'll be teaching a grief group on loss and grief, something that's near and dear to my heart. That's at 1 o'clock next Sunday. And Gerald Davis has his Also Reads program next Sunday afternoon as well. You'll see on there, we're going to be starting, I'll be teaching a Foundations of Unitarian Universalist class starting on the 15th. That's a 3-week class on Sunday mornings. And then we've got our Martin Luther King Day Parade. We've got a new float. We always have a great presence in the Martin Luther King Day Parade. In just a moment, we're going to take up our collection that's for the Martin Luther King Commemoration Society here in Tulsa. So I hope you'll support all the Martin Luther King activities here in Tulsa through a gift today in our offering. And then you'll see Many Voices, One Vision. On the 18th of January, we're going to begin a process of developing our new 10-year vision for All Souls as we go into the future. We're going to have dinner for everybody and a wonderful time. I think there's about 250 seats in this first one. We'll do a few others, but I hope you can make it and be a part of this really important conversation about the vision and future of All Souls. At this time, we're going to take up our first offering of 2023. We give away our offering plate to those important institutions in our world that and in our community that are making a difference. Today, it's the Martin Luther King Commemoration Society. If you do want to make your pledge payment to All Souls, of course, we can give away our plate because our members pledge to the church. You can do that, but put your pledge check in an envelope or cash in an envelope and mark it that it's for All Souls. Let us now receive this morning's offering. Beautiful. Thank you, Rick. I know there's all these great announcements in the back of your program, but if you're here in the sanctuary and you're just feeling inspired by my theatrics, and you want to just take your order of service and crumple it up and try to throw it into the can, I encourage you to do that as a symbol of your letting go of some old stories and replacing them with some new stories. I do want to say, before we extinguish our chalice and go out, there's some coffee and refreshments. We have a bookstore, and I hope you'll enjoy some fellowship on this first day of the new year before you leave. But I want to say, Issei Barnwell, the great singer, Rick, you know Issei Barnwell, and she said, I heard her in concert once, and she told this story. She said, we're all in the story of our life, and we think, we all think we're somewhere in the middle of the story, right? I've been talking about these stories we tell ourselves in our head, but now I'm talking about our life story. And she said, we all think we're somewhere in the middle of our story. She said, but we don't know where we are in our story. We could be in the last chapter of our story. We could be on the last page of the last chapter of our story. We could be on the last sentence of the last page of the last chapter, rounding our way toward the period of our life. I say this to say, make the most of this day. Make the most of this year, 2023. We have the breath of life within us. Say yes to yourself. Say yes to your life, to your loved ones. Say yes to what you're doing. And if it's time to move on, begin to tell a new story and know that you have control of your stories and you are worth it. May this be the most beautiful, spectacular, and loving year of your life. Let us go forth and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.
Tuesday.